Welcome back to Badass Women 50 Plus. I am Robin Lane. I am the producer, director, psychotherapist, and creator of this show. Today I will be interviewing Tyler Chase, who is an auteur filmmaker who founded L'Orange Productions and is a graduate of NYU Film School. In today's interview, we will screen 3 of her promotional trailers for her most recent documentaries. She's a multi-award-winning documentarian. And though each of these stories is different, the theme that she presents is the same, and it is about displacement and what that does to the human soul. Tyler is a fighter and an activist, and so she went before the United Nations Periodic Review of Human Rights to screen footage from Castle in Brooklyn, which she will discuss today, that tells the story of a family displaced from their home of 40 years. The story of Castle in Brooklyn shows how cities like Barcelona revere visionary architects, but in New York City, we evict them. But that's enough of me. Let me introduce you to Tyler Chase. Well, we are here with our guest, Tyler Chase. Hi, Tyler.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Good.
So let's talk about, you started out as an actress, producer, writer, but in the theater. And then you
Yes, I
switched
started out in theater and also
in the
as a model.
theater, yes. And then you went into become a filmmaker, an auteur filmmaker. So do you want to tell us what made you make that switch?
Well, I have been doing theater for quite a few years in New York City and doing, mostly off Broadway and as a, writer and director and stuff for the Ensemble Theater Studio, places like that. And then I had an unfortunate incident happen, so it kind of affected my health.
What
And
happened?
I don't really want to talk about it too much, but I was the victim of a hate crime. And so I decided to, because I didn't know how my spine was injured, so I didn't know how I was going to respond as an actress, singer, dancer. I was in a really low time, but I needed to create, and I just figured it doesn't matter how I create because there's different mediums of which to create. So I decided filmmaking, and a lot of people were saying filmmaking would be a good outlet. Because instead of doing plays, you have it recorded, and there was many aspects I liked to that. So I went to NYU and, learned cinematography and editing and the whole 9 yards, and decided to switch, reinvent myself.
Reinvent yourself. So filmmaking is a very expensive process. It can't be easy.
Filmmaking, if you have the tools, what we decided to do, I learned a lot about technology, and of course after NYU, we were working 35 and 16 millimeter, I had to learn digital. So I learned it on my own and got the camera, and it's doable. And I finished, I completed the film A Castle in Brooklyn, King Arthur. It took quite a few years, but we do get donations through a fiscal sponsor called Fractured Atlas. So people can donate, and we have been deemed that we're doing socially relevant work. So therefore we can be umbrellaed by this Fractured Atlas, which is nonprofit.
Tell us
So that's where we
about
get a
your
lot of our money.
film. Can you tell us about your film that we're going to be looking at the trailer of that concerns Arthur Wood, and it's called Castle in Brooklyn?
Castle in Brooklyn was filmed over a period of 8 years, actually, narrated by Golden Globe Award winner Brian Cox, and it brings us through the doors of the Broken Angel building and to its creator's visionary Arthur Wood as he clings to his life's work, the Broken Angel building. It was an icon of the bohemian artist culture that once permeated Brooklyn, New York. So it's
Before we
basically
go
like,
in, Tyler, excuse me for interrupting you, but before we go into that, I remember you telling me this wonderful story about how you were able to get the great actor, Brian Cox, to narrate for you. Would you tell us that story?
Yes, gladly. So I wanted to finish my film, and I had done a small showing of it for Arthur Wood up in Beacon so he could see it and approve of it because it was very important to me that he liked it. But I was unhappy because I didn't have a narrator. And I wasn't going to put it out in the festivals until I had a narrator. And everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I really want a narrator." So I went to this event at the Players Club with my friend Ronald Rand, and just had a good time. And I met this really cool actress. Well, I knew her before. I went to see her plays, Nicole Ansari, and we were being bad girls. We were like drinking and having a good time, and we went to the roof of the Players Club, and basically really lying down on the roof, looking at people below, really crazy. It was really having such a great time, like two kids. And at one point she said, "Hey, Tyler, what are you doing with your film? Why aren't you having it out?" And I said, "Well, because I'm not happy. I need a narrator, and I don't have the money for that kind of narrator I need." And she says, "Well, who do you want?" I said, "Morgan Freeman or Brian Cox." And she said, "Well, I might be able to help you with Brian Cox. He's my husband."
For a second, because I just want you to tell us a little bit more about Arthur Wood.
Arthur is truly is a visionary artist, and what a life. He is now 92, and I do believe he's staying alive to see the actual, the film has been in many festivals. It's won many festivals, been all over the world. And right now we're in the middle of getting errors and omissions insurance to get distribution. And he is the kind of person who doesn't give up. And to this day, he still thinks somehow he's going to get the broken angel back.
So let's take a look at your trailer to the film.
Once upon a time, a young artist, Arthur Wood, and his wife Cynthia bought an old building on auction. Arthur had a vision to reconstruct the derelict house into something magnificent. Behind Arthur Wood is his creation, the broken angel. For some, it was a beacon of hope, a monument to the imagination in a neighborhood ravaged by drugs and crime. But to Arthur, it was to be his life's legacy.
Arthur was here when this place was ridden with drugs. We went through Armageddon here.
Arthur is like our king. He's the king of the neighborhood, king of the artists.
Before everybody knew about Brooklyn, it was an attraction in Brooklyn.
Journalists appeared from every part of the world, and the Broken Angel was a celebrated attraction in Brooklyn.
Why did you want to build something this high?
Well, I don't consider it high. I like the view up here.
People give up when they're 30 and they're not buried until they're 60 or 80. Okay? They might as well be dead. My drawing of the Empire State Building for Wedgwood, China, each one of these was reproduced 3,000 times. And I did it for 5 years.
After living in peace for 28 years, Arthur and Cynthia's lives are changed forever.
I like Arthur Wood's bravery, don't you? Hallelujah! Hallelujah!
Okay, we're back. And I'd like to talk to you about another little film that you made that was part of, I believe, a big film called Sweet Soul in Exile about Deborah Masters. whose work is in the Met, the Guggenheim, the Brooklyn Museum. I remember seeing her work up at the Storm King Center, and she was also displaced. Could you tell us about that film and what it's
So,
part of?
yes, if I could, I'd like to start from Blues for 475 Kent, or Blues for 475. It was a brutal mass eviction. That was a catalyst for that film, and also filmed over a period of 8 to 7 years. And I immersed myself with Deborah Masters and jazz pianist Connie Crothers to capture the lives of artists living on the edge. You know, what happens to them during, before, and after something like that, what happens to their lives, and what happens to the community. You're witnessing her emotions as she's going through the gamut of leaving her home of all those years, of leaving her community, and her artwork as it's being pushed out the doors and through the archways. You have these huge statues and artwork being pushed out. So it's almost like the art's being evicted, the art's being pushed out. So that's when anybody who sees the film, and it was in Melbourne and all over the world, they liked it for
Well,
that. They
she's
understood.
an extraordinarily accomplished artist. Didn't she do that beautiful mural at JFK?
She did. Terminal 4.
Terminal
She,
4.
yes, and anybody who comes into this country sees that first thing up on the walls.
Deborah, what you did with this beautiful entranceway, really restoring it to its beauty. You now know that we have a viaduct. We didn't know that. And this is the official entranceway to Coney Island. And of course, it took someone from Brooklyn, Williamsburg, to make it happen. We know that. Because we all know that Williamsburg is the artistic capital of Brooklyn. So, may I declare this day, Deborah Masters. Release on Ocean Parkway Viaduct Grand Opening Celebration Day in Brooklyn, USA.
Okay, we're back. So then you did another story called Always Here. Am I correct?
Well, Always Here is in development and production as I am finishing the editing on Blues for 475. So I'm working on one in post-production and I am filming another. And the reason you can do that is you get spurs of people calling you. Yes, you can interview me. You're not paying these people, so you have to make appointments. A lot of the work is sporadic. You have to go out sometimes weeks at a time, like we did to Kentucky. We went to Kentucky for 2 weeks to film an archaeological site and the marvelous discoveries that Dr. Gramley had made there with a Seneca shaman by the name of Sam Briggs. And it was incredible. So we have time in between that we can edit, and that's what we're doing. We're doing 2 things at a time, which I often do. But that, you're talking about Always Here. We haven't the real name of it yet, but it's on the cultural erasure of First Nations that has occurred for hundreds of years through the destruction of their ancient artifacts and historically relevant sites. And it begins with the Skibisky site in Massachusetts, which is a 10,000-year-old site that was recently saved from destruction due to community effort. And so we revisit that situation throughout the film because it's not over. Some states like Massachusetts have a terrible record of destroying Native American sites.
Yes, one of the children that you interviewed tells that. I was quite astounded. Tyler, I can listen to you talk about this forever, but we're going to have to go and take a look at it because I want to have enough time for you to talk about what you have done with the drones. Tell us how they work.
Well, drones are very necessary in today's business of film, I think. Years ago, one would have to hire an airplane or a helicopter to do an aerial shot. The photographer would be in there and you weren't, I don't think the director was even in there. Or I don't know how they could communicate, but you were kind of perched over doing aerial shots. And you can see them in the old movies. They're kind of like shaking, you know. So drones are great because there's like gimbal cameras and it's nice and steady and smooth. And, you know, I did it because I wanted to have aerial shots for Castle and Brook and King Arthur. And I tried to.
And how do you see, if the drone is up there, do you have a camera that you look in and you see it?
Well, you have a tablet, goes on the RC, which is a radio controller. And the radio controller connects to the drone. So you can see everything the drone is seeing because you have a camera on the drone. So when we work with drones, we do have a visual observer. I always do, always. Very rare, and I have to be in a very specific situation that I will work without a visual observer. So that's kind of important. So, you know, I passed my license test because I couldn't find someone to do the shots I wanted. And I said, well, I'll get a drone to do it myself. So basically, that's what I've done with all my films. I film, I edit. I had to learn everything. I
want to end on this note. I want to go back because I didn't ask you about the fact that you had actually gone before the United Nations, right? Mm-hmm. You want to just, in 2 sentences or more, tell us about that?
I was under the impression that violations of human rights were punishable or something could happen. I didn't know that they weren't. And so when I was investigating for Castle and Brook and King Arthur and Blues for 475 Kent, which were glaring violations of human rights, what they were doing to these people, throwing them out, you know, without a place to go, and the things that were just ridiculous. So I was able to be vetted and accredited, and I went over to the United Nations with Switzerland and showed parts of Blues of 475 and A Castle and Brook and King Arthur. And also they also had something at Columbia University. So they asked me to speak about what I call preemptive forced eviction. And that's what those people happened to them because they didn't it wasn't a legal eviction. It wasn't a normal eviction. They were, you know, somebody came to their door and they had 5 hours to get out at 475 Kent. So just imagine, nowhere to go.
I don't want to imagine.
It was so cold. It was Martin Luther King Day, no moving trucks. It was horrific. And they came with axes down the hallways, and you can hear, Guy Lesser really describes it so well, like kind of very militaristic. He said it was terrifying. And if you didn't open your door, they took the axe and they knocked it down. So people really didn't know what was going on. They really had no idea. It was the middle of a Sunday. They were getting ready to do their laundry or whatever. And these people appear at their building and say, get out. The building might blow up because there's a matzah factory in the basement.
It's a wonderful thing that you can able to show this and stand up for these people. So I want to thank you. I want to say goodbye. And I want to tell you that I'm a huge fan of yours. Both what you do technically as an auteur producer, director, but also because you're such a fighter and because you stand up for people who are really suffering.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin.
So thank you so much for being a guest on Badass Women, and you personify being a badass. Remember, we are on the last Tuesday of every month. So here's a big embrace and see you next time.